Welcome, everyone, to another episode of hashtag CRA Arthritis from the CRA and AHPA annual scientific meeting. I'm really excited today because we have somebody from Vancouver, where ACE is also based, and it happens to be Shirin Von Mende. She's a physical therapy clinical resource educator in rheumatology and works at the Mary Pack Arthritis Program in Vancouver. And the Mary Pack Program is a big supporter of ACE, and we are a big supporter of theirs. So, Sharon, welcome to the show. Really happy you're here.
Thank you for having me.
I should mention that you're also a clinical instructor in the Department of Physical Therapy at the University of British Columbia. And today we're going to talk about a workshop that you led. And my understanding is this was your first CRA meeting, and you're kind of entering with making a big splash, that you're not just attending and participating in the session, but you're actually leading a workshop. And the workshop was best practice recommendations for assessing and treating idiopathic inflammatory myopathies for the allied health professional. So congratulations on your first meeting and your first workshop at the meeting.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just like to jump right in.
Now, I'm going to start for the benefit of our audience to just clarify maybe a couple of terms that we're going to be using throughout the interview. And the first one is, I think a lot of our members hear the term or descriptor allied health professional, and some of them might not be aware of what we exactly mean or who falls into that professional category. Can you first of all just define for us who is an allied health professional?
Yes, they are often a non-physician healthcare provider who in rheumatology work often in a multidisciplinary program. So examples of these kind of professionals include physiotherapists, occupational therapists, nurses, social workers, and counselors. And our approach to rheumatic disease is to look at it from beyond the pharmacological management. So we're looking at how do we support people, help them in management of their symptoms such as pain, fatigue. We help them with providing specialized, individualized care in terms of exercise. Our nurses are there to help with understanding what are these medications people are taking and how to manage side effects. And social workers are a great resource for people who are coming to terms with a chronic health condition, as well as navigating the resources. And the hope is that these professionals will promote the individual to become a self-manager and to take control of their condition.
We often say the patient should be the quarterback or captain of their healthcare team, and I think you're supporting that work that we're doing from a patient education point of view. So when they hear when our audience hears the term arthritis health professional, they're sort of interchangeable. Then they're referring to the same group of healthcare providers.
Yes, just lots
Okay.
of different terminology, I guess, meaning
Okay.
similar things.
All right. Now, idiopathic inflammatory myopathies are also not widely understood. So for people living with these conditions, what are they and how do they typically affect muscles or strength or daily function?
Yes, it's a huge term, idiopathic inflammatory myopathies, and they are a group of different subsets of conditions. And that's been really advanced in the last few years because we now know that they can present differently. Some of them will have some additional systemic manifestations where they might involve the lungs, such as with interstitial lung disease. With some of the subsets, we've actually been able to isolate autoantibodies, which is really exciting because maybe there'll be more targeted therapies towards that. But in an essence, they're all characterized as an autoimmune condition with chronic muscle inflammation. And just like with a diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis, two individuals with a similar subset can present completely differently.
Right.
Some might present with like a slow progression of muscle weakness where They start noticing difficulty, for example, getting out of a chair. Well, some people might be more dramatic onset, where even getting out of bed or the weight of their head is so heavy that they have difficulties maneuvering. And so for some people, it can impact them with their leisure activities all the way to having to actually stop work and struggling with their day-to-day activities.
Now, your workshop focuses on best practice assessment. So, what are some of the most important things that clinicians should be measuring, and why do these matter for patients in their day-to-day lives?
Yes, and this is really crucial because I think the standard of care, or standard of assessment by the rheumatologist or by the healthcare professional has always been first, of course, to look at the blood work. And then secondly, for the physical assessment is what's called a manual muscle testing. And in this subset, it's called the MMT8 because they test 8 muscle groups. And so what this would entail is, let's say we're testing the deltoids, I'd be resisting someone and getting them to maximally press against my hand and then giving it a score. So a 0 to 5. So 0 would be no muscle activity. So this would be, for example, someone with a spinal cord injury.
Mm.
And then 5 is considered normal strength. Actually, anywhere between 4 to 5. So this is still the majority of what people will assess. But if I see an individual with myositis and I assess their biceps and I say, oh, your strength is 4 out of 5, that's not bad. The individual will tell me, well, I still have difficulties carrying groceries. I'm not able to carry my young child for long. So it doesn't have that meaningful impact to them.
Mhm.
So what we've been trying to look at is, can we look at more functional based assessments so that it has more meaning? And so one of the examples that we've added into our assessments, and this is also seen across Canada, because I actually did this workshop with an occupational therapist in Ontario, Allison, and they do this similarly, is something called a 30-second sit to stand test.
Mm.
And with this one, we time someone and see how many times they can get in and out of a chair over 30 seconds. And not only counting the repetitions, but we ask them to rate how hard they felt that activity was on a Borg rating scale from 0 to 10. So that when we repeat it down the line, hopefully with some intervention, hopefully with some better improvement of their immunosuppressive medications, they will either do better on the reps or they'll report that it's less fatiguing, that they can do more, that they're not as sore afterwards. So this means has more meaning to them. And so that's what we were trying to add, some more functional based measures in our assessment.
One of your colleagues, Marie Westby, is well known to our audience and has been on our program a number of times. And we actually did a joint health education course around exercise and arthritis. One of the things that we obviously covered with Marie is that how exercise and rehabilitation can be challenging for people with arthritis who have muscle weakness or fatigue. So I'm wondering, what does safe and effective exercise look like for someone with an inflammatory myopathy?
This is actually a key aspect with this population. And I just want to go back a little bit because
Sure.
prior to the 2000s, there was like a real fear of prescribing exercise to people with this condition. Often they were told to rest because there's already an elevated muscle enzymes, and those people would do worse. And since then, there's been so much research coming out of the benefits of exercise. There has actually been shown to increase mitochondrial synthesis, which we know is going to help with their aerobic metabolism. And it actually can target against pro-inflammatory cytokines. So there's actually an anti-inflammatory effect. And there's been a lot of studies looking at exercise, either home-based exercise, and more recently, which is shocking, I think shocking for people, is higher intensity interval training,
Mm.
which you would think, oh, it's even hard for the average person, let alone someone who's struggling with an autoimmune condition. So a lot of our discussion with people is to ensure them that it's exercise is beneficial, that it is not going to harm them in their condition. But really, this is where someone familiar with this condition is important because we have to tailor the exercise to the individual. So if someone is really struggling, they've off work, we may have to start with a home-based exercise program and build up that tolerance. But we also see people who are very active, they want to return back to their sport, and they're not happy with just getting to a baseline of day-to-day management. So I think in terms of exercise, it's really tailoring it to that person and being there to help them navigate it.
And for patients to have the knowledge and confidence to be able to have those conversations, um, because I think what you're describing is, they can maybe get the information, through AI chat or on the internet and get some ideas, but it's so important that they're consulting with their specialists and working together on a plan that's going to make sense for them and maybe not too much put too much pressure or stress on them at the start, and that they can gradually get into a program that's going to be suited to, as you identified, whatever their needs are in terms of activities. So that's that's really, really crucial, and thank you for sharing that. We're going to have some links at the end of this interview. So if people want to learn a little more, we've got some really trusted sources of information, including that course with Marie Westby. I'd like to finish off by looking at patients who are dealing with fatigue and functional limitations. So, what kind of practical strategies can help them better manage their condition and maintain independence?
Yeah, I think, typically fatigue is a crucial concern across the spectrum of rheumatology. And that is a lot of things that we educate people on is how can we best manage our energy reserves? And does that require pacing our activities? So planning ahead, knowing, if it's a day that you have multiple appointments and a lot of crucial responsibilities, how do you prioritize your energy bank? And in terms of exercise, there's a lot of research that shows now even small bouts of exercise can be beneficial. So it doesn't have to be all or none.
Mhm.
We can incorporate it with in a manner that works. I mentioned in the workshop the ACSM guidelines, which is for healthy individuals to work out resistance training and their goals. Actually, only 30% of Americans are achieving that. And
Mm.
they've noticed that even if they don't achieve those lofty recommendations, people are making progress. So that's very important to share with our individuals so they don't feel like it's overwhelming. And as well, during periods of flare, there might be impacts on your function and having looking into assistive aids or maybe at that point helping to improve your mobility with walking poles or walking aids is a stepping stone. And it's okay during those periods to have some sort of support to help you to get through that crucial time. So I think it's just having that awareness that use some tools within your realm that will help you get through those tougher periods of your condition.
Mm. Well, thank you so much, Shirin. We're really excited and congratulate you on your first CRA annual meeting, but also on your workshop and the incredible work that you're doing at Mary Pack. We will have links to the program, Mary Pack program as well, if people want to learn more about Mary Pack or contact somebody there. So thank you very much for your time, and we really do look forward to being able to speak with you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks to you, our audience, for joining us on another episode of hashtag CRA Arthritis. We look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Bye for now.